Anyway, I'm Scott, and I just want to welcome everybody here. Appreciate you being here, and appreciate Judy Fullmer being here today. She's going to do the presentations, and I'm just going to ask you to, if you're not muted, if you could just tell me. I got a list up here, and I'll just ask. You can just tell them a little bit where you're at. Bonnie Teeples. She's muted.
I'm unmuting. From Oregon.
And Faye Spencer.
So,
Morning, Faye.
Good morning.
You want to introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Faye Spencer, Salina, Kansas,
Okay, and Connie Larrington.
and I attended the national conference.
Okay. And I think Connie might be muted. She's there in Nebraska. Barbara Perry. I don't
Or
know.
is that Barbara Thomas?
Well, I see a Barbara Perry on here too. There is
Both
a
of
Barbara Thomas. How about Judy at headquarters?
Hello.
Hello, Judy. And then Barbara Thomas.
Good morning, Barbara Thomas in Alaska.
Perfect. And Eleanor.
Eleanor, Grace Lake, Illinois.
Well, welcome. Linda with an I.
Linda Hess from Kansas.
Well, welcome.
You
And
got
Linda Nyseth.
From Linda Nyseth from Oregon.
And I've got a Jeannie here. I think it's Jennine. I don't know if she's muted or not. And Marion. Is Marion on there? And Wanda. Wanda might be muted.
Hello, everybody. I'm Wanda Burnell from Tennessee.
All right. Did I miss anybody? My list keeps moving up and down. Anyway, I'm going to turn the time over to Judy Fullmer. I'm actually going to spotlight her for you. And Judy, the time's going to be yours.
Okay, thank you. I told Scott I would like to have, I'd just like to know who my audience is, and it looks like it's mostly FCE members. Anyway, this program came about because of something that happened to National FCE. So it's not really about the specific thing. If you have questions about that, Bonnie's here and she can answer those. But this is just a very simple presentation about what our roles are to be serving on a board of any kind. If you're serving on a local board, a state board, or a national board. So I'm going to start. We'll see here if I can do this.
Oh, it's recorded, huh? Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we're not sharing right now.
We're not sharing.
Not
okay.
yet. I'll talk to you.
I bet I had to do it again, didn't I?
Yeah, you do. You have to go down the bottom, wiggle your cursor, and then you'll see a share at the bottom.
But not on this screen.
Yeah, it'll be on your Zoom screen.
Here we go. And it's probably going to share my game that I play all the time because that's
Okay.
behind my screen.
We're not seeing it yet.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep, there's my game.
It just says you're starting to share. There you go. Now you just need to go to the far left-hand side where it says from beginning. Okay, you're on.
Okay. So, fiduciary roles. That's kind of a big word. Okay. That's not... Okay, it worked when I did it before, but it's not wanting to do it now.
What, it's not trying to move forward?
Right. Hmm.
Okay,
Ah,
okay, why don't you stop your share and then go back into it and see if, let's just try it again. It just worked a second ago.
there we go.
No,
Yeah.
it is not
Are
showing.
you seeing it?
No, we're not seeing it. You need to share it. Share the
I should have
screen.
been nervous, shouldn't I?
You're fine.
Okay.
No, we're not sharing yet. I'll tell you when it is. Okay, you're starting to share.
But that's my game.
Right. So
This
now
is what I want to share
okay, now go to the far left-hand side and go,
from the beginning.
yep, from the beginning. You know, you should be able to just click on the screen and it'll advance for you.
There we go.
There you go. See, we can do it.
Yeah. Fiduciary roles are not just about money. So this program came from the National Association of Parliamentarians. I'm a member there. They have 3 levels of membership. A member is the lowest one. The next level is a professional parliamentarian, and the next level up is a registered professional parliamentarian. Since I was a member, I could take this class. I've had to pay for it. And probably because they do education differently than we do as FCE. There were no notes, there were no handouts. There was the only thing you could do was copy off of the presentation they did. And they had a short PowerPoint presentation. And just to give you some of their credentials, it was David Jackson and this CJ Calvin. Okay, the PRP is a professional registered parliamentarian. The CPT is from the American Institute of Parliamentarians. So there are 2 groups of parliamentarians, and these guys are members of both of them. And the T means that they can teach from the American Institute of Parliamentarians. And the Calvin, JD, means he was a lawyer. I am not a lawyer. I was sitting there taking notes because I thought it was valuable information for us to know about. So it's pretty generic, but let me go back to my notes here. So this workshop is based on information from this NAP presentation, and it's not intended to be used for legal advice. If you have an issue, you should consult a lawyer, or if your organization is covered by liability insurance, contact your agent if you have a fiduciary breach. This presentation is meant for your information and to make you aware of the legal responsibilities of serving on a nonprofit board. Some of what I'm sharing will be very technical and the language is legalistic, but I'll attempt to help you understand it. So it's not just, oh, I'm going backwards. So at conference, Bonnie was my co-presenter, but I'm presenting by myself today, but she is present. So if you have any questions about anything, maybe both of us can help you with that. And here is the disclaimer. So a fiduciary duty is a legal responsibility to act in someone else's best interest without considering your own. An individual or an entity accepts a legal commitment to act in the best interest of a beneficiary when accepting a fiduciary duty. So when you are elected to a board or an office in a nonprofit organization, you have stepped into the fiduciary role. It's your duty to put that organization first. So in researching this, the delegates that go to conference are also fiduciaries, and that would be true at the state level too, because they are making decisions based on information that they have received. So every fiduciary relationship involves two roles. The fiduciary is a person or entity that accepts the responsibility to act with integrity and to make decisions on someone else's behalf. This party usually has specialized knowledge, access to sensitive information, or legal authority over specific assets. Their job is to put the other person's goals and well-being ahead of their own. The other party, called the principal, is the person relying on the fiduciary. A power of imbalance exists because the principal typically lacks the technical knowledge or physical ability to manage the matters themselves. The law recognizes this vulnerability by holding the fiduciary to strict obligations that go well beyond what a normal business deal would require. So here are some examples of fiduciary relationships. Attorneys are the fiduciary. They have clients, trustees of an account or something. They have authority over the account. The beneficiaries of the trust are the principals. A corporate officer, director, and shareholders is a business entity. Guardians have fiduciary responsibilities over their wards, and real estate agents have responsibilities over their clients. So for FCE, the fiduciaries in our organization are board members, delegates, members of the nonprofit or charitable organizations, and the principal is the organization, FCE. So all of these people have a legal responsibility to put the organization first. Even though our fiduciaries may not have the skill of attorneys, lawyers, trustees, or guardians, we are still held to a legal responsibility to the organization. The law will recognize this. Okay. Fiduciary duties include the duty of care, the duty of loyalty, the duty of good faith, the duty of confidentiality, the duty of prudence, and the duty of disclosure. These words all have a legal meaning. They were not just chosen because they sound pleasant. And so the everyday words are on the other side. So the duty of care is that you make informed decisions. Loyalty, you avoid conflicts of interest. Obedience, you follow the laws. Good faith, you act honestly and fairly. Confidentiality, you don't share secrets. Prudence, don't accept a role you aren't qualified for. And disclosure is to tell all pertinent information. These words were used throughout my research. They're not just words or pleasantries. They have legal meanings. A breach of duty may not be the same for a charitable organization because the board delegate member will not have the same skills as fiduciaries in other relationships. For example, not many of our members would have the credentials of a lawyer, so we would not have the same responsibility that a lawyer would have. So what do these duties involve? The duty of care to make informed decisions is don't harm others, but the main thing is you read the material before the meeting. If you've been sent minutes, if you've been sent board reports from other officers, if there are financial reports, it's your responsibility to read those before the meeting so that you can make an informed decision. So care, don't harm others, and read the material before the meeting. Loyalty, the duty of loyalty. A breach, I'll go back up a little bit. A breach of the duty of care happens when someone fails to act with the level of caution a reasonable person would use in the same situation. So a reasonable person would not vote on a motion without knowing all the facts. Or another example that might bring it down more to our level is a reasonable person would not speed on ice. An unreasonable person might be speeding on the ice and therefore their car slides and starts flipping around. Okay, the duty of loyalty is to avoid conflicts of interest to the organization. It requires fiduciaries to put the interests of the people or entities they serve ahead of their own. It's the single most important constraint on anyone who manages someone else's property, money, or business affairs. Breach it, and courts will strip away every dollar of profit you made and potentially void the transaction entirely. The duty of loyalty attaches automatically to anyone in a position of trust where one party depends on another's judgment or control over assets. You don't have to sign anything agreeing to it. The law imposes it the moment the relationship is formed. And to me, that's probably the position of being a treasurer of an organization, because you are automatically given power over the financial assets of that organization. So it's your duty to treat that very carefully. The duty of loyalty and the duty of care get confused constantly, and the distinction matters because the legal consequences are different. The duty of loyalty governs conflicts of interest. It asks, did you put yourself ahead of the people you serve? The duty of care governs competence. It asks, did you make your decision with reasonable diligence? The next duty is the duty of obedience to the organization. So we all know there are rules, laws, and regulations that we must follow. So the duty of obedience requires directors and officers to follow the organization's governing documents and all applicable laws, follow the rules, state, federal, IRS bylaws. If you're a state organization, the parent organization bylaws also affect you if you were in some kind of a situation where something had happened. Bylaws are a contract with members, and they cannot address every single issue. And another point that was made at this time was the First Amendment doesn't apply to organizations. So as an organization, we don't have a First Amendment right to voice our opinion about things. This obligation of obedience is most commonly discussed in the nonprofit sector, where mission fidelity is paramount, but the underlying principle that fiduciaries cannot knowingly act outside their authority applies across all organization types. So follow the rules. If our mission is to improve the lives of families and communities, then that's what we should be doing. We can't jump out of that role and decide that we're going to be take care of the forest, although that could be a community thing. But I mean, you know what I'm saying? You can't automatically just take another mission on that isn't in your bylaws. You're supposed to follow what your bylaws say. Any law that was broken would obviously be a breach of obedience. The duty of good, is that black screen across yours? There, it went away on mine. The duty of good faith is to act honestly and fairly, so you don't gain an advantage for yourself and you act in the best interest of the organization. Using a position to secretly profit or gain an unfair advantage violates good faith, even if no specific rule was technically broken. This probably comes to play more in maybe in trust, where people are supposed to invest the money in the best possible way. Or another thing might be is if it was real estate, maybe the person selling, the real estate agent, if he finds a good deal and doesn't tell the client and makes a profit where it should have been the client's profit, that would be another example of not acting in good faith. Other examples include lack of diligence, negligence, failure to cooperate or communicate openly, working against the other party and their ability to complete their obligations as expressly written in the contract, deliberately misleading or acting in bad faith, which includes deception, dishonesty, and ulterior motives. And the duty of confidentiality, don't share secrets. A breach of confidentiality happens when someone discloses, accesses, or uses protected information without authorization, violating a legal, contractual, or professional duty to keep it private. Corporate officers, trustees, and business partners owe heightened duties to protect sensitive organizational information. These duties flow from the position of trust, not from a specific agreement. HIPAA, an example is the HIPAA and non-disclosure agreements. So it's the ethical obligation to keep information secret and not misuse it. And in some cases, boards will have a policy that is signed by board members. Probably that just makes them more aware that all of these fiduciary duties are legally binding. And I don't know that FCE would actually have a confidentiality as far like the HIPAA. We do ask members to keep certain things on the board private, not what I want to say, it's in the best interest of the organization. It's not to protect any member or anything from something. And sometimes eventually that information is released. I know when we had this issue going on, Bonnie asked us not to share anything outside of board meetings until all of the legal stuff had been taken care of. So that's one instance when it's used. And this last one, the duty of prudence. Prudence, the quick thing is, do not take on a role that you're not qualified for. Prudence is the ability to make careful, well-reasoned decisions. It means thinking before you act, weighing the risk, and choosing a course of action that a sensible person would take. You might have come across the word prudence in a legal document, a court decision, or financial contract. It sounds formal, but it carries real weight in law. Courts use it to measure whether someone acted responsibly. Lawyers use it to argue whether a client met their duty of care. Understanding what prudence means can help you recognize when it applies to you. In everyday use, prudence is about avoiding unnecessary risk. A prudent person doesn't ignore obvious dangers. They plan ahead and act with care. And here's where a driver who slows down in heavy rain is exercising prudence. One who speeds through is not. So you should decline any appointment you're not qualified to handle. If handling the money is not your thing, you should not be the treasurer. If you're not organized to keep minutes, maybe you shouldn't be the secretary. And the last one is the duty to disclose. Fiduciaries must engage in completely forthright behavior. They must disclose all relevant information that could have an impact on their ability to carry out their duties as fiduciaries and/or on the well-being of their beneficiaries' interest. Duty to disclose refers to the duty a fiduciary has to disclose any conflict of interest they may have when acting on behalf of a beneficiary. An example for FCE would probably be at the national level, states are not allowed to judge the entries from their state. And that could apply to scholarships too. If your state has scholarships, maybe you need to be careful who is deciding who gets those scholarships. Or the person that is serving on the board should let anyone know that I know that person's from my town, that type of thing. So most organizations have some kind of expectations, and they may not be actual fiduciary duties, but they can be spelled out in an employee handbook. And every organization should have a handbook, rules, plans, or procedures to guide the organization in making decision. The National Association of Parliamentarians sees itself as a guardian of parliamentary procedure with an obligation to maintain the highest standards of ethical conduct. Upon joining the organization, individuals must agree to abide by the Code of Professional Responsibility for Parliamentarians. The ideals toward which all parliamentarians should aspire are to assist in upgrading and improving the profession, assist in maintaining the integrity and competence of the profession, maintain high professional standards and keep abreast of the latest research in the field, promote a spirit of cooperation, professionally responsible practice, and fair dealing with colleagues, conduct oneself so as to reflect credit on the profession and inspire the confidence, respect, and trust of clients and the public, encourage non-discriminatory standards in all aspects of parliamentary practice. That's just one page. There were 3 pages of on the code of conduct for the parliamentarians. I did have to sign that. I took the test in a I can't think of the word now. I had to take it in a lawyer's office. And then they had to sign off that I had taken it there. So their expectations for parliamentarians are very high. This is a list of expectations for National FCE board members: loyalty, attitude, effort, responsibility, teamwork, meetings, board discretion, support on board decisions, discretion, committees, deadlines, vouchers, scanning, vacations, and dress. So
Judy,
that's,
can I interrupt there?
you may.
I think maybe we ought to just insert, and you take NFHS and you could put like state officers or even club officers or anything else on that, club board members or whatever it might be. So it needs to be for whatever level it is. It's just not there,
Right.
and those are the things we want for this organization to grow and maintain the standards that we should have.
I'm not sure that states have, I think most states do have handbooks or some sort of guidelines for their board members. I'm not sure they have a page like this, but we do. But yes, I would support that every state should have that. And I think Bonnie's considering having this being something that board members would sign, because we read it or we go over it, but then it's like, once you do that, then is it forgotten? I think if it was signed and you put it in your handbook that you signed it, it might stick with you a little bit better.
Yeah.
Judy, if you don't mind if I interrupt right here,
No, go ahead.
we did change that this year, and we called it a code of conduct, and it has been signed by every one of the board members that are the new incoming board, and they've been filed with the secretary. After serving on the ACWW board and issues that we had there, and then the issues that we had with National FCE, I just felt it was very important, and Judy and I had talked about this before I changed it, that it needs to have a little bit more I don't know how to say this. It needs to be a little bit more important to the board members. And I think once you put your signature to a document, then it does become a little more important to you than just if somebody reads you those expectations and we talk about them. So that change was made this year, and we will be making a change in the board manual to note that as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Bonnie. That's very, very good to have. I do have here in front of me the definition of what all of these things are, but they really fall back on the code of conduct or the fiduciary duties that I've already read. These all touch on that. If you would want a copy of it for your board, I think that Bonnie would be happy. I shouldn't say that.
I would be glad to.
I have it here. I could cut and paste it out of my document too and send it to a state if you wanted the actual wording. The loyalty one, you serve on the national board, your loyalty is to the national organization, not to your individual state. So they're short little things like that, but they basically support what we've already talked about and read. I don't know if I'm not going to read those all because it would take time unless somebody would like to have them read.
One thing I want to
Nobody's
talk
raising
about,
their hand.
Judy,
Any of
just,
them?
when I was on the national board, and I could kind of see the writing on the wall that, when I was on there, you couldn't be a state officer and be on the national board, which the bylaws have been changed, and mostly because we were running out of people. And I felt really strongly that a state president should not be on the national board, and I still feel that way because that state president needs to be loyal to that state. And you can't even the scriptures talking about, you can't be a master of two. You can't have two masters. You need to be one or the other. And so you could be a secretary for a state and still be loyal to the national. But I think it's just important that you're
Yeah, I would.
loyal to your organization.
Right. And the way our National FCE is, the layers of it are the state presidents are the delegates to the national annual meeting. So in that case, their loyalty would go back to the national organization. But I agree with you. I don't think they could have two.
Yeah,
You don't want state presidents serving on the board as long as they're a state president.
correct.
Yeah, so what happens when you have a breach of a duty? So there are 4 elements. So first of all, you establish what duty was, what the duty was and what the breach was, and then the damages, and then what caused it. This is kind of legalese. This is once you've found something and you turn it over to authorities, this is what they're going to be looking at. So actions that cause a breach: self-dealing, conflicts of interest, failure to disclose material information, mismanagement of assets, commingling funds, usurping opportunities, and the misuse of confidential information. These violations can be deliberate or careless, and they include both actions that the fiduciary took and actions that the fiduciary should have taken but didn't. I'm going to go back a little bit because it talks about these. Self-dealing is the most straightforward breach. The fiduciary uses their position to benefit themselves at the expense of the organization they serve. Conflicts of interest are a close second. A fiduciary who has a financial stake in a transaction involving the fiduciary's assets must either disclose the conflict and obtain informed consent or step aside entirely. Failing to do so is a breach, regardless of whether the deal was objectively fair. Failure to disclose material information, we have talked about that, but fiduciaries have an affirmative obligation to volunteer information the beneficiary would want to know, not just avoid or lying when they were asked about it. Silence when disclosure is required is treated the same as an affirmative misrepresentation. So even if you know there was some reason you shouldn't have been making a decision and you don't say it, you have still made a breach there. Mismanagement of assets. A fiduciary who manages money or property must exercise reasonable care and skill. For trustees, that means evaluating investments in the context of the entire portfolio, considering factors like the beneficiary's needs, risk tolerance, inflation, tax consequences, and liquidity requirements. Virtually every state has adopted some version of the Uniform Prudent Investor Act, which judges individual investment decisions not in isolation, but as part of an overall strategy suited to the trust objective. And we do have a trust, we call it the Legacy Fund. And I hope, I think we have things in place to prevent some of this, but whoever's in charge of that, they have a big responsibility. And one thing, well, it goes ahead and said, the classic example is a trustee who concentrates the portfolio in a single stock or asset class when diversification would have been prudent. Another common scenario is a fiduciary who leaves assets sitting in a low yield account for years without reviewing whether a better approach exists. Inaction can be just as much of a breach as a bad decision. So there's I think there's five FCE members are on that committee that look at that. I think it's in a pretty low risk funds because we didn't want to risk losing any of that money. So I think it's in pretty, that's my opinion. I don't think I'm on that anymore, but I have been, and it's not just one person managing it. We've got 5 members managing it. Commingling funds, mixing the beneficiary's assets with the fiduciary's personal funds is a breach in virtually every context. Courts often treat commingling as a per se breach, meaning the fiduciary doesn't get to argue that no harm resulted. The act of mixing the money is enough. You just can't do that. You have to keep it separate. Usurping opportunities, corporate directors and officers who learn of a business opportunity through their fiduciary role cannot take that opportunity for themselves. Diverting it to a personal venture is a breach, even if the corporation ultimately wouldn't have pursued it. And that probably doesn't apply as much to FCE, but I can see that being a real estate situation where somebody sees a good buy over here and they don't tell the people, or they don't give them, don't give them the opportunity to consider that for themselves. The misuse of confidential information. Fiduciaries routinely have access to sensitive information, trade secrets, financial data, legal strategies, health records. Using that information for personal advantage or sharing it with unauthorized parties or failing to protect it from disclosure all constitute breaches. The category overlaps with self-dealing when fiduciary trades on confidential information for profit. So that's all pretty, a lot of legal terms there. But I think it's important for us to be aware of those. Some of them are not going to apply to us because we aren't dealing with real estate. We aren't dealing with the trust with guardians or something like that. We are dealing with a nonprofit organization that we're trying to keep afloat. So then we have this fraud triangle. Breaches happen when these 3 things are present. The first thing is the pressure. So there's a motivation, an incentive to commit fraud. That could be insatiable greed or a lust for power with little balance for moral principles and human empathy. So it's down here in the corner, the little green thing. That's probably the first thing that happens. The next thing is the opportunity. The opportunity is the ability to carry out the misappropriation of cash or organizational assets, opaque and unnecessary complicated systems involving rigged transactions. This is something that the person could do. Naive and trusting public, which could be the beneficiary, the organization, public and weak regulators, privileged connections and positions of trust, and access to people's money. Those can all give opportunity to commit fraud. And the justification, rationalization of dishonest actions. This is what the person might be thinking to themselves. Stupid people deserve to be cheated. They had it coming. If we didn't do it, someone else would have. They need our leadership. So it's like a triangle that you usually have, I mean, you usually have to have all three of those things for someone to finally commit fraud. So what is the result of the breach of duty? If it's turned over to lawyers, you can be compensated for your losses. Sometimes there can be punitive damages, which is additional money. But for the person who committed fraud, their professional consequences, it can be the loss of their job, the loss of their license, the loss of their certification, and their reputation. So, the end. Are there any questions?
No questions or comments? When Judy got ready to do this presentation, I just thought, man, this is something that we all need, something we need to evaluate in our life. I know that through our, I'm very active in church and I'm a leader in our church, and we have audits, which we're going to have this Sunday afternoon. We're going to have an audit on our accounts, and there are lots of checks and balances and so forth, and I'm glad there are.
Yeah, we did make some changes to the bylaws to help a little bit, but you can't put everything in the bylaws to prevent something. But one thing we did make it that the president, if their material isn't, or the documents aren't given to the president or the auditing committee, the president does have some, I guess, more of a bite. She can request them, and there's a date, a September something date. If she hasn't received them by then she can take further action. And there are guidelines on how to remove somebody from office. And the other thing we've done the last 2 years is we have made sure that there are more people on the signature card and more people have access to the bank account. That was neglect on our part. It got to, one of the accounts had there were 4 names on it, and the treasurer was one of them, but 2 of them were deceased. They were past presidents. So it just hadn't been kept up to date. So we will do better. We know better, so we'll do better.
This is true.
Who would you recommend to be on the account of an organization? Sure.
So,
Well, do you want me to answer that, Judy?
Yeah, go ahead.
So what Judy had set up is the president, the 2 vice presidents. Did you have the secretary and the treasurer?
I think so.
Okay, so there were 5 on there. And to me, that is one of the first steps. That is the best step that we have made in a long time. And I remember being on the account with, I think it was Charlene Budd was the treasurer at that time. But she stayed on after I did. Lynn Maples then came on. And I know those changes had been made. But I think that is one of the most important things we can do, is to keep current with the officers on your accounts. Mm-hmm. And it isn't just to watch to make sure that the money is not being taken care of. To me, it is just a point of reality that what happens if the treasurer is the only one on there and she passes away? Then where goes the money? And I think that was, I still am just so grateful that Judy made those changes and got the deceased people off and got the real people on, so that there's plenty of people to be able to take over if it needs be. Now, not everybody has access. Not everybody can write checks. Not everybody can move money, but at least they're on there, and a change can be made to put them in a position where they can do those things if need be. Does that answer your question, Faye?
Yes, thank you.
So I was just telling Judy Fullmer that in Oregon FCE, and I think it's in the bylaws that it's the treasurer and the president are on the signatures of it right there. And I happen to be the president, and Bonnie happens to be the state treasurer, which is not necessarily, I don't think it necessarily looks good. But the other thing that concerns me too is we travel in a car together often. And I can only imagine what would happen if we both became deceased all of a sudden. It would be a real big problem for Marion and the rest of the officers. But the things we need to look over are Linda Nyseth. Yeah, she'd have to figure it out.
Thanks.
Well, Judy, I really appreciate your time and effort in putting this in there. And this is something that we all need to look at. And I think all of us have got stories that we could spend all day long talking about situations that have happened either at our local volleyball association that I belong to. We could talk about different clubs, organizations, uh, professional people that this has happened to. And I think a lot of it is just we need to keep our eyes open. And I think you touched on a little bit, Judy, is the fact that something that happens when this goes awry is lots of times we have love and we have trust of some of these people that have taken advantage of it, and it's in all organizations at all levels. And I appreciate your time in doing this, and so all of us can kind of look at it and see what we need to do to help prevent it. Any other comments or questions? I will
Thank you, Judy, for all the information.
Yes,
Yep.
thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. And by the way,
Well, since I did it for the,
go ahead.
Since I did it for the national conference, it was already put together. So I told Scott, yeah, I'll do it again.
Well, I really enjoyed it. I thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll tell everybody a goodbye, and I hope to see you next month. It's on Honey, and I'll be sending out that email pretty soon. And I do have some others set up, and actually, I've got one set up clear up through January of 2027. So
Nice.
appreciate that.
Good.
I'm going to stop the recording here, and I'll let you guys chat a little bit.